Welcome to Paradigm Shift Parenting, a podcast for women who make their lives better by first making themselves better. At Paradigm Shift Parenting, we believe that self-improvement is the highest form of self-care. Each episode, we're going to either shift our mindset about something, explore the myth that motherhood and martyrdom are synonymous, replace the oh-so-trendy victimhood mentality with a healthy dose of accountability and responsibility, or simply explore the shared experiences of modern motherhood. I'm your imperfect host, Binky Bell, and I'm glad you're here. Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Paradigm Shift Parenting. Now, if you're listening to the podcast, if you're an iTunes listener and you haven't left me a rating or a review, what the hell, guys? No, I'm just kidding. But if you could do that, that would help me out a lot, and I would really, really appreciate it. If you're listening, or watching rather, on my new fancy YouTube channel, you should definitely hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can be notified and bothered by me whenever I post a new video. Doesn't that sound so exciting? Like, aren't you just dying to have that in your life all the time? I could be with you all the time, like the creepy stalker friend that you need. All right, so just let me into your life. All right, that's all I want. I'm just kidding. But if you guys could do those things, that would be really awesome. Thanks. So today we're going to talk about anxiety. Anxiety in children. Anxiety, it hit our family like a fucking ton of bricks. I'm not going to lie. About 6 months ago, one of my sons had a severe acute anxiety attack, and I had actually tried to share this story before. I've tried to talk about it. I tried to record an episode about it, and I couldn't get through it without crying because it was so just like hard. It was hard to deal with because it was so unexpected. But today what we're going to do, I'm going to tell you what happened the days leading up to the anxiety attack. I'm going to tell you what happened during the anxiety attack and what we've been doing since this has happened, and what we continue to do to monitor his health. So my sons, you guys know that I have 8-year-old twins and I have a 6-year-old, and one of those boys had a severe anxiety attack. It was last summer. It was about June. The days leading up, I really, at the time, I really didn't think anything was out of the ordinary. Now that I have the gift of hindsight, I can tell very obviously that there were a lot of signs. There were a lot of red flags that I missed, and I missed them because, I mean, kids are weird. Truly, kids are weird. Kids, they ask weird questions, they say strange things, and I have a lot of kids, so we hear a lot of weird things. So the symptoms just kind of slipped through the cracks, unfortunately, and it got to a tipping point for him, and it definitely boiled over. The days leading up to this anxiety attack, he had started asking more questions about like his health and his body, and again, you know, these are young ages, 8 and 6, so around that age group, it's really not uncommon for kids to ask about their health, about their bodies. He was asking about death and the afterlife. And I've said before, we don't censor anything from our children, really. We make everything age appropriate for discussion and education. So I didn't really think much of it. Now, he had also started asking to relax in the bath a lot more, because something that we've always done with our children whenever they're very young, if they're upset, if they're distraught, like our practice is to get them in the bathtub and let them hear like the running water, have warm bath water, lots of good salts and scents and stuff to really just kind of help center them and bring them back down out of a state of heightened emotion. So that really should have been a big red flag for me, that he was asking to relax in the bath a lot. But I missed it. I missed it completely. So he, like I said, he started asking a lot of questions. And now I'm going to tell you some of what he was saying. And I'm going to be honest, it feels vulnerable, and it feels icky. I really don't want you to judge him. I really don't want you to judge our family. And I understand that some people might. But it is what it is. And I just hope that somebody hears it, and I don't know, maybe it'll help what you're going through. But he started asking a lot of weird questions about his health and his body, and he would point to like his finger, and he would be like, like, this looks squishy. It looks squishier. Like, does it feel squishy? Is it too squishy? Is your finger that squishy? Have you ever had a finger this squishy? And I would just kind of be like, it's fine. Like, you're kind of, and I even told him, I was like, you're kind of freaking out over nothing, dude. Like, it's just a finger. It's okay. But he would start asking more questions, and he would say, like, look at my arm. Is my arm supposed to bend this way? Does it go this way? Does yours do it? Show me how yours does it. Like, move your arm that way. Again, just kind of thought he was being kind of weird. And then the day of the actual anxiety attack, he was in the bath, and I was hanging out in the bathroom with him, and I'd kind of started to notice that something more was going on. And he started telling me that he was like, he's like, I don't want to die. And I would say, you really don't have anything to worry about. You're young, you're healthy, you've never had any major illness. We don't have any major childhood illness in our family. Like, I think you'll be okay. Like, you don't have any reason to worry about this, right? But he kept bringing that up. Like, he kept talking about it, that he didn't want to die. And then he would say, what if you die? What if dad dies? I don't want to die. Things like that. And again, he would keep bringing up various things with his body or his health or his eyes, anything centered around his physical body and his health. So we sat down for dinner, and we were eating, and he got up very suddenly, and he kind of shoved his plate, and he said, I don't want to eat anymore. And my husband and I remember so clearly, we kind of looked at each other, and I said, that's fine. Like, you don't have to eat anymore. You can be done. And he said, I think that there's bugs in my food, and they're in my body now. He's like, there's bugs in my blood. I can feel the bugs. Something's wrong. Like, there was bugs in the food. Now they're in my body. Very frantic. So we said, you're fine. Like, you're good. Just, we'll take care of your plate. We'll wash everything. Like, you just go relax a little bit. And I turned around to start clearing his plate, and I heard a sound that I had just honestly never heard my son make before. He was hysterical. It just instantly hysterical, and he was grabbing his chest, and he was saying, my heart's beating too fast. My heart's beating too fast. I can't breathe. And then he was saying, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I feel like I'm going to die. And he was screaming this. Like, I have never seen the look of just pure terror, legitimate terror in my children's face like that before. So my husband and I take a second, and we're like, legitimately like, what the fuck is going on right now? But then I said, that sounds like an anxiety attack. And I had never, anxiety wasn't even on our radar. Like, it hadn't come up. I didn't think anything was going on until that moment where it just boiled over completely. My husband and I had like a little bit of a back and forth for a minute, and we're like, there's nothing really like physically wrong with him, but he thinks that there is. And I ended up telling my husband, it doesn't matter if there is or not. Like, his brain's in overdrive. And I had tried for probably a minute or two to get him to calm down, and he was still just, he couldn't get his breath under control. He was hyperventilating, sobbing hysterically. So I threw him in the van, I loaded the baby up, and I took him to the emergency room. And his anxiety was so bad, even on the drive there, he couldn't calm down. Keep in mind that he is very young. He's never had anything happen. He's never been seriously injured. He's never seen death or been exposed to death. Like, he's never seen any true real illness. He doesn't have any frame of reference. So this feeling that he was having in his mind in that moment, he legitimately thought that he was going to die. So while I was driving him to the emergency room, he was in the back seat, and he was saying, this is a part of the story that always gets me. So if you're uncomfortable seeing people get emotional, you might want to skip ahead a little bit. But while he was in the back seat and we were driving to the emergency room, he kept saying, "I'm so sorry that this is going to be the last day that I get to see you, Mom." And he was saying, it's rough. He was saying, "You've been such a good mom. I'm so happy that you got to be my mom." And he, pretty rough. It still gets me. It's so sad. Because I put myself in his position, and he legitimately thought that he was dying. He thought that he was dying, because his heart wouldn't slow down. The feeling in his body was so overwhelming. He thought that he was dying, and he was praying. He spent the whole drive to the hospital, he was praying, and he was saying, "Please God, like, don't let me die today. You don't have to take me today. Don't take me today. I want more time with my mom. I want more time with my family." It's been 6 months, and I thought I could tell it without crying. So good thing I got my handy dandy scrunchies here. It was the most heartbreaking thing I've ever seen. So we get him to the hospital, and he was so consumed in this anxiety attack that we couldn't get him to calm down, and he had to be sedated. And the most fascinating thing about that experience was they gave him the medicine, and they said, they were so nice to him, and they were saying, you're gonna feel okay in a minute. Just give us a minute and you will feel better. I promise you, you're not gonna die today. They said, I swear you're not gonna die today. And they got him a shot. They got him, it was a very hardcore medication that they gave to him, and he laid down after they administered it, and you could literally, as soon as it hit his system, like, you could see physically when it hit his system, because he physically relaxed, and he let out this big sigh, and he sat up a little bit, and he was like, "Oh my God, Mom." He said, my mind feels normal again. He was like, "I feel like I have my old mind back." And that was, huge, so huge. And it was I was so happy that he was able to articulate what he was feeling and the relief that he got. But you could just see physically his whole body just relaxed. And he kind of came back to normal. Now, unfortunately, he was like he was like the 1% of the population that has an adverse reaction to that medication, and he started hallucinating shortly after that. And that was something that was difficult too, because I wasn't sure if he was hallucinating because of the medication that they gave him, or if he was hallucinating because there was something happening in his psyche. And we do have, on my side of the family, we have a lot of schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and a lot of his anxiety sounded paranoid. He was paranoid about bugs in his system and bugs in his blood and stuff. So that was a concern, but luckily it was just because of the medication, right? So we got him home, and we got a referral for a child psychologist, and that I always feel weird complaining about the wait time, because I know that like in other countries you have to wait like months and months to get into a doctor. We had to wait a couple months to see him, but we finally did get in, and my son had been going to therapy. It's a play-based therapy. They get to play games together, and they talk. And what was interesting about that is whenever you go to meet the psychologist, it's very similar to whenever you yourself as an adult go. They go over basically like your rights as a patient. So he was trying to explain to my son in ways that my son would understand that this is a safe space. So like whatever my son tells him, he's like, I don't have to tell your parents, unless you say you're gonna hurt somebody or hurt yourself, things like that. But we had to do kind of like this family interview, and we're a good family. We're a really, really good family, but even then, I get nervous because you never know what kids are gonna say, right? So he starts asking them, like, is anybody abusing you at home? And I'm a peaceful parent, but like they know that, because I've had conversations with my kids, that I used to spank them, and I've apologized to them, and we have these conversations. So like when it comes up, I'm always like wondering like, oh, are they gonna be like, oh yeah, my mom used to like beat the shit out of me or something. But so he's like, no. And then they ask, does anybody smoke in your house? Like, what else is anybody smoking? And my son starts to describe. He's like, my dad smokes. And he's like, oh, cigarettes? And he's like, no, he uses like this special thing, and it's like this big, and it's got like this hole. And I'm like sitting there like he's describing like a crack pipe right now. But we explained that it's like the vape thing that my husband used, and that's all fine. But he made it a point to explain to my son that this is very much a safe space, that he can talk about anything, and that his job is to help him. And that something else that he said that I thought was really neat was that he wants him to feel comfortable, but that if he doesn't feel comfortable, then that's okay, and he can let me know, the parent, because the most important thing is that my son feels like he can trust this doctor. So I thought that was really neat. Now we've been doing it for 6 months now, and my son actually got to a point where he can see this doctor as he needs, and we haven't seen the doctor for a couple months. I guess probably like 6 weeks. And the symptoms of his anxiety are now, they're starting to pick up a little bit. So before we got to see the doctor in the months that we were waiting to get in, it was a lot of work, and I took a lot of notes, because the anxiety that my son has is very, as I said, it's very centered around his health and stuff. So I had a full list, front to back, of health concerns that my son had, and I was constantly and these aren't just things that my son would say in passing. He would be in tears, like in literal tears, not able to sleep. He wasn't getting any sleep because he was concerned about swallowing his tongue, or he's very concerned about like his uvula, like the thing in the back of your throat, stuff like that, to the point where he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Very severely debilitating to his ability to function in daily life. So during that time before we got to see the therapist, I spent a lot of time talking to him, telling him things like, because one of his concerns was about like his bones just breaking, like randomly breaking. And so I would tell him, the only time that happens is if something physically happens to break your arms or your legs, or, you know, just really talking him down a lot, trying a lot to inject rational thought into his anxiety that's creating a bunch of irrational thought for him. And then whenever we went to his therapy sessions, the therapist started teaching him what's called rational thought challenges. And that is, if you caught my live a few months ago, I actually talked about this. It's whenever you start to have anxious thoughts that make you worry about things that are really probably improbable, you have to challenge those thoughts with rational thought. And that's what we had been doing the whole time. So that was really validating for me that I was doing something to help him, something beneficial. And then it was really validating, or it was really good for my son to hear that from the doctor too, because as much as we want to help our kids, I think that it's important for them to hear information from multiple sources, because it cements it more for them. It makes it more reliable, more trustworthy. So that is really what we've had to focus on the most. We've also had to remind him, because whenever he did go to the doctor, they rule out any actual physical symptoms. So you get blood work and you get x-rays and stuff like that, because he was concerned about pain in his back and things like that. So they gave him an x-ray. So we've had a lot of conversations basically saying, you know, remember whenever we went to the emergency room, they did an x-ray, they did a blood work. Like, if you had a disease, if you had broken bones, if you had something wrong with you, they would have caught it. So those conversations have been taking place a lot. But the therapy has helped tremendously, and I'm really, really happy that we were able to give him that we're in a position where we have wonderful health insurance, we have access to wonderful doctors, and we can get him seen relatively easily. That's certainly a huge privilege for us. But the thing that's hard for me is that he's so young and he's had to think about these things so much, and they've affected his life so much already. It makes me worry a little bit for, you know, whenever my boys start to hit puberty maybe, and they get, you know, a huge surge of hormones, and there's a lot of things going on. It's hard enough, right? But I imagine that it'll be much harder if you have anxiety already. So my plan, my ultimate, the thing that I'm holding on to the most right now is that he's learning to deal with it. Something that his therapist told him was that anxiety isn't going to go away, is what he said, and he said that's okay, because anxiety is just a feeling. He's like, if you get anxiety before you take a test, you get a little nervous, that's normal. It's just a feeling, it's normal. What's not normal is whenever it affects your ability to function, right? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to teach you how to deal with it so we can avoid having a full-blown panic attack. So the thing that I'm grateful for is that he is learning these tools, because they've actually come in handy, because we've had a long stretch between appointments over the holidays and everything, and because he was doing so well. But that long stretch without therapy has created space, and maybe some of the stress from the holidays, I don't know, but it's created space for anxiety to start kicking up in him again. So I can see it. He's starting to have anxious thoughts. He's starting to get real worried about his health again. Stuff like that. He's not sleeping well at all. He's not eating well. So that is something that we have to be really, really proactive about. Something that I started doing is high protein breakfasts. And I heard about it through Dr. Jordan Peterson. If you're interested, for yourself or for your children, you can look that up, and maybe try it, see if it helps. I don't know. It seems to help us a little bit, or maybe it's not. Maybe I just feel good about being proactive. I don't know. I mean, that's been our experience so far, and it's gosh, there's so many things that are hard about it. What's hard is there's a little bit of guilt, because before you have kids, you don't think, or I don't think about my family history. And then this happened with my son, and then I'm realizing, like, oh shit, like I have, 2 people with schizophrenia, 2 people who are paranoid schizophrenics in my family. I have like just crazy amounts of mental illness. My husband and I have personal history with mental illness, with anxiety, with depression. And then I start to feel a little bit guilty because I'm like, oh shit, like we decided to smash our genes together and just create a poor, anxious child. That's not fair. And that doesn't feel good to think or to say, but the benefit and the thing that we are insanely proud of is that we're getting him help, because we know that whenever we were children, we had anxious thoughts. My husband especially, he was telling me that he remembers being so like wound up and scared and anxious, but he also knew that he couldn't talk about it at all. Like he had to keep it inside. So again, I'm glad that we're able to give this to him and to help him, especially because these tools that he's learning are going to help him for the rest of his life. Because again, what I'm trying to do here with my children is I'm trying to give them a solid foundation so they're not having to learn all of this and unlearn all of this in their 30s like so many of us are. So we're trying really hard to do that. Now, we haven't seen any anxiety crop up with the other children so much. That's not to say that it won't, but we haven't seen it yet. This really came out of the blue for us. So I guess to wrap it all up, if you have a child dealing with anxiety, anxious thoughts, if they're telling you their concerns, and they're telling you their concerns often, please keep talking to them, because their concerns are fucking ridiculous, right? Like my kid saying that he's worried that there's bugs in his blood. I know that that's insane, and you know that that's insane, but the feeling of fear and sadness and worry, those feelings are so real for them, so real, and they need you to take them seriously. They need you to talk them down, because you're the safe space. So you need to be the safe space for them. Even if you don't have access to mental health right away, you can be your kid's safe space, and they need that so much. I can't tell you how many adults I talk to who say that they never even they didn't feel like they had a safe space in their parents at any age, and that's not okay, right? So we got to be the safe space for our children. We absolutely have to. Now, I had also started looking into resources for children with anxiety, OCD, things like that, because he's got a few other things going on that we aren't really prepared to I guess talk about yet. But there's a podcast called Anxious Toddlers, and she talks a lot about kids with anxiety, kids with OCD, kids with Tourette's, all kinds of neurological things, and that's a wonderful resource. Her Instagram is also really, really good. But again, if you have time, listen to that podcast called Anxious Toddlers. It is so good. Or I think it's called The Anxious Toddler. I'll put it in the show notes. But again, I guess just to, wrap everything up, that's what we've been dealing with. Again, it's been so difficult. It's so difficult because, to think of what an anxiety attack is. After it happened, after he had his anxiety attack, I reached out to adults who have had not just like generalized anxiety, but have had full-blown panic attacks. I talked to somebody in particular who, when he had his first anxiety attack, he went to the hospital because he was convinced that he was having a heart attack. He's a little bit older, and he thought genuinely, truly, that he was having a heart attack. So he took himself to the hospital, and it turned out that it was a panic attack. So I think of that through the filter of a very young child who has no scope of reference, who has no idea what this is. And I think about the fact that he had no doubt in his mind that he was dying. He was dying. He was going to die. And that has, I mean, to experience that and then to think about when that feeling starts to rise up again, of course that's going to trigger more feelings, and you're just going to spiral out of control thinking that you get anxiety, thinking the anxiety attack is going to happen again. I mean, how horrible. How horrible. And it reminds me too that we as a society tend to not take our children's problems very seriously. Like, we brush them off a lot, and I think that we could all do a little bit better with that, probably. So I guess if anything, before I keep saying I'm going to wrap this up and then I keep talking more, but I guess the takeaway is don't be afraid to get your child help. Like, really, don't, like, talk to their doctor, be the advocate for your child if they need it. A lot of times there's a fear among mothers of being like that mother who kind of makes something out of nothing or is being over dramatic or something, right? But like, if you feel like your child is struggling with something, especially with mental illness, you have to advocate for them. You have to get them seen. You have to get them treated, and you have to have a constant conversation around the topic, because that's the only thing that's going to help them. It has to be something openly talked about. It's something we talk about constantly in our family. We're trying constantly to make it something that's just normal, in the way that you get a cold, in the way that you get, I don't know, the flu, you break a leg sometimes. Like, it's something that happens, and it's something that you deal with. And I really try so hard to make it a point to him that he does not have to deal with it alone. There have been a few times where he has tried to use anxiety as an excuse. You know, he lashes out because he's so tense, and he's lashed out at us or at his brothers before as a result of the anxiety, and he's even said, you know, I can't help it, it's the anxiety. And the uncomfortable conversation that I have with him around that is that the anxiety, right, what you have going on, that's not your fault. Unfortunately, it is your responsibility to manage it, you know, but because it's your responsibility doesn't mean you have to do it alone. You have a whole network of people. We're all here. We are all going to help you, but it's your responsibility to let us know how you're feeling and to keep checking in with yourself. Notice whenever you start feeling those feelings rise up. A few things that we've made connections with, that he's made connections with, are how he feels whenever he plays video games for too long. Because, you know, especially if you're playing certain types of games, they can get very, very intense, and just by the nature of the play, they get your anxiety kind of up a little bit. So he himself has made those connections about how he feels with the games. He has made connections between what he's eating and how he's feeling, his level of activity and how he's feeling. So those, again, I think are things that are going to be really helpful and serve him really well whenever he's older. Gosh, I just keep rambling. I'm so sorry. So let's wrap it up. If you have anxiety, if you have mental illness, your child has mental illness, be the advocate. Be the advocate. Keep fighting for yourself. Keep fighting for your kid. Get them help. It's not the end of the world. And I'm going to be honest, it felt so dark and so scary for our family. I felt like we did something to cause it. But just try not to internalize those things. It's just something that we can deal with. And it's so common now. You know, you're not the only person dealing with it. As I say all the time, our problems aren't that unique. I've found out that a lot of our friends have had children with anxiety, even children with depression. Children are getting it younger and younger for whatever reason, we can talk about that a different day. But we got to help them. We got to be there for them. So if you made it this far, guys, thank you for listening. If you feel like the episode would be beneficial to somebody, if somebody needs to hear it, please share it with them. If you happen to listen to it, share it in your Instagram stories and tag me so I can thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.